All right, we're going to try to keep us punctual and keep things rolling along. And the stragglers can join us as they will. Welcome to panel 1C, Climate and Trees, Regional Tree Planting Efforts. I'm going to be moderating today, and we're joined by four terrific hosts, who I'll introduce in a moment. But first, to give us a bit of context, trees, as we all know, are marvels of environmental engineering, filtering our air and water, cooling our city streets, providing oxygen, of which I'm a huge fan, providing homes to roughly 80% of the world's terrestrial wildlife, keeping our economies running with wood and paper, and on and on. Recently, there's been a broad scientific consensus that trees will also play a pivotal role in helping us fight both climate change and the global collapse of biodiversity that we're seeing. More locally, they can also play a critical role in helping to restore the Chesapeake Bay and our local waterways. So this morning, we're going to hear from four great groups working to increase tree canopy in different parts of Maryland. Starting with rural efforts and ending here in Baltimore, we'll be hearing from David Tana with Chesapeake Bay Foundation, followed by Megan Mills with Howard County Recreation and Parks, then Josh Clark with Anne Arundel Watershed Stewards Academy, and finally with Justin Bowers with Baltimore Tree Trust. So it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to this panel. Thank you again for making the time to come speak with everyone. And we're going to open it up with David, if you'd like to get us started.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Let me go ahead and sharing my screen. All right, hopefully everybody can see me here. So my name is David Tana. I am the Maryland Outreach Manager with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. For those of you that are unfamiliar with us, we are a clean water nonprofit based in Annapolis, Maryland, but with offices in Virginia, DC, and Pennsylvania as well. And as Ashley already mentioned, trees have an amazing capacity to clean our air, to filter our water, to sequester carbon. And for those that don't know, and I'm sure most of you do, agricultural runoff is the largest source of pollution affecting the Chesapeake Bay right now across all the different sectors, across all the different states. So one of CBF's primary goals is to address that issue by getting trees on the ground. We do this in a number of ways, the actual infield restoration, which I'll go more into in just a minute. We also do a lot of advocacy during the General Assembly session here in Maryland. So we were one of the big advocates for the Climate Solutions Now Act, which incorporates, the planting of, I think it's 5 million trees in the state in the coming years. And we educate as well. Education is a very important component of what we do. So whenever we have an event, we are talking about these issues. We are getting people out there, getting them in the ground. And again, we are addressing it mostly from a rural agricultural standpoint. And we do that in a number of ways, but the one I'll talk most about here is our farm stewardship program. So we work with landowners across the state, trying to get different kinds of best management practices on their properties. It could be the installation of exclusionary fencing for livestock. It could be going from a conventional corn and soy, back to a rotational pasture-based system for livestock. But the last phase of all of these projects, traditionally, is planting trees on these properties. So this image here, we do this with volunteers. Usually on weekends, we'll have 100 people come out and plant, 1,000 trees on 5 acres of, in this case, what was formerly a cornfield, alongside a first order tributary somewhere in the headwaters of the Chesapeake Bay. And we find this really impactful for a number of ways. One, we are cutting off the pollution in the form of the excess nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus, and excess sediment at its source in these headwaters before it can get downstream and cause a problem somewhere else. We are educating the public with these events. We think that that's critically important to get them out into the field and get them actually doing the work to make them feel that investment in the environment and the trees that they're planting. And it's usually a great time. We have a really fun time with these people. They come from all different sectors, across age, across demographics, and it's nice to get out there and meet them and see them engaged and excited about the work that we're doing. We do plant all native species. Again, we do about a lot of places, like we also have these programs in Pennsylvania and Virginia where mostly contractors do them, and they'll plant roughly 500 bare root saplings per acre of these properties, just for that retention level. We actually use a larger stock. We plant 2 and 3 gallon material all native species, huge diversity of species. We find that that's really important too, ensuring that we're not just planting a monoculture of one kind of tree out there, but planting, everything from upper story canopy trees like American sycamore and tulip poplar, to understory trees like eastern redbud and river birch, and putting shrubby stuff in between, particularly in these riparian areas, things like silky dogwood or black chokeberry that really want to be in and near the water. We are very fortunate that another part of our nonprofit, we own a 285-acre farm in Upper Marlboro where we grow all these trees from bare root saplings or from seed. So we're actually providing our own stock for all of these events, which is a huge deal for us. It cuts down on costs. And yeah, it's a wonderful way to get these in the ground. And we need to be doing more of it. So I can primarily talk about what we do in Maryland with volunteers again. But in Pennsylvania, we have a huge campaign right now to plant 10 million trees across the Keystone State, again, with various partner organizations. That's both in these rural areas, in cities and streets as well, because trees are important everywhere. And we do rely a lot on those partners in the state of Pennsylvania, again, Virginia, here in Maryland. We work with lots of different local watershed groups, water keepers. We get funding from all kinds of sources. We do a lot of grant writing. So we rely on people like the Chesapeake Bay Trust or the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to get the money to do these practices. We're also very fortunate that we get funding from WGL Energy and Sterling Planet. If you're a homeowner, you're paying your electricity bill, you can choose to offset the carbon emissions from your energy by paying into one of these funds. And so they allow us money to, again, get more trees in the ground, which is really, really fantastic. And at the tail end, so, after 4 hours with 100 people, we've planted a 5 or 6 acre forest, again, about 200 trees per acre. And we let them grow. We'll go back 6 months to a year later to check on them. We put exclusionary tubing, the green Tubex tubes, and we stake and shelter everything to ensure that, deer aren't rubbing on it or grazing on them, that little things like rabbits and moles and voles aren't getting in at the base of the tree and eating away at the stem. And we're also very lucky in Maryland. I know there's a big problem. You can get these buffers in the ground fairly easily, but maintaining them, going back years later to see how things are doing, removing those tubes, those stakes and shelters, has historically been an issue that a lot of people and a lot of organizations face. CBF is lucky in that we have been partnering with a program called Breakaway for it's been over a decade now. I think we started in 2007 or 2008. And basically, partner schools from across the states, from across the country even, will visit us for their spring, summer breaks. They choose to do service learning instead of going out and sitting on a beach somewhere and getting the sun. And they have been extremely beneficial in like the month of March and early April, before grasses start growing again, before things get too buggy and ticky. We can take these students out in groups of 15 to 20, and they will help us do the maintenance. So we're actually able to keep up with a lot of that buffer maintenance. Pre-pandemic, it was different. We haven't had groups in 2 years, which is unfortunate. But we're very grateful and very lucky that we have that group of people to rely on to get some of that work done. I'm just going to check my notes and see if there was anything else that I missed here before I pass it on to Megan. No, I think that's about it for me. I'll give some of my time for additional questions or to let some of the other speakers run over. But yeah, that's our high level kind of view of what CBF is doing to plant trees across the thing.
Fantastic. Thanks, David. We're going to hold questions to the end. Please post any questions that you have under session in the Q&A tab, and looking forward to having a dialogue with you guys after the presentations are done. Megan, if you want to take it away now and tell us about what's going on in Howard County, that would be terrific.
All right, I'm going to share my screen with you. Okay, so I'm going to give you an overview of Howard County's Natural Resources Division planting programs. I'm going to start with our forest mitigation program because it's our largest, but I don't want to dwell on it too long. The forest mitigation program is one way in which we comply with the Forest Conservation Act of 1991. So this is something that we are required to do. I would rather spend the time that I have talking about our voluntary programs, the programs that we have that go above and beyond compliance. So the first program that I'd like to talk about is the Turf to Trees program. This was created in 2016 with funding from the annual watershed protection fee that each Howard County resident pays into. Tree planting is one of the most effective and cost-effective ways for the county to earn mitigation credits. It is considered a stormwater management BMP. And in a fairly short time, we have been able to establish over 32 reforest their properties. There's no easement involved, but we do go back and make sure that their survival rates are above 75%. The minimum acreage for a property owner to participate in the program is 1/4 acre planted at a density of 500 trees. So we generally plant at a density of 200 trees per acre. So we're targeting properties for this program that have 1.5 to 10 acres so that they have that extra 1/4 of an acre or more to give to the program. Again, there's no easement on it, but they are giving up a good portion of their property. So we have had people participate with 2 acres, 4 acres. In general, they do stick to the 1/4 acre. You can see in this map here, you can tell, so the slope is going downhill, and that is buffering an area that got swampy and that road would flood. There is a stream on the other side of that road. So while right now we're operating on a wait list because this program is incredibly popular throughout the county, we do target properties that help to mitigate environmentally sensitive areas. The next program I'd like to talk about is the Stream Relief Program. So this began in 2003, and it's fairly unique because all of the funding for this program comes from the general fund through Recreation and Parks. It started in DPW, but it was quickly picked up as a permanent part of the Natural Resource Division. We will often identify and target properties that have streams, or we'll go into a neighborhood where a stream runs through multiple yards and try to get multiple residents to participate on their property. We provide and plant 50 or more trees, or property owners can apply for a minimum of 12. So they can do a smaller planting on their own, or we will go out and we'll plant 50 or more trees on their property within 100 feet of the stream or 75 feet of the stream. We do trees, and we also do shrubs because, as stated before, that's a really important part of our riparian buffer. So in 2019, we established an annual tree giveaway. Previously, we had done several tree giveaways through the county, but it is now a permanent part of our tree planting program. So every year we aim to give away at least 2,000 trees. We hold the event in September, and residents can come pick up 1 to 2 trees to be planted on their property. I really love that this became an established part of our tree planting programs because, you know, it kind of reaches up everybody. Anybody with a property can plant generally at least 1 tree, whereas some of our other planting programs target larger properties or properties with streams. This one anyone can get a free tree for. So the other programs that I wanted to talk about are our volunteer programs. Students Branching Out is something that started in 2013 through the Governor's Stream Challenge grant, which ran until 2015. We went into schools and identified areas where we could do large contractor plantings as well as smaller volunteer plantings with students, coupled with a segment of in class where we talked about watersheds and what these trees will do to help protect the streams and all the way up to the Chesapeake Bay. Although that grant ended in 2015, we have been able to continue it. We go to 1 to 2 schools every season, so spring and fall. We plant on site and we do that little watershed lesson in the classroom. So that is now funded either through the Stream Relief or the Turf to Trees program, depending on the logistics of the project. And we also host at least two volunteer plantings every year on Earth Day in the spring and on National Volunteer Day in the fall. So if any of our residents don't have property and still want to participate in one of our programs, they can come out to a local park or open space and help us plant a forest conservation site. The other two programs that I want to talk about are closed. However, I'm really hoping that we can resurrect them one day. So our tree canopy program was run through the Governor's Stream Challenge grant as well, and that planted 1 to 10 trees on people's property. We helped them identify where tree canopy coverage was lacking and where they would benefit most from it. And we would use contractors to go and plant on their properties. I do want to, one thing that was a problem why we haven't necessarily continued that program or found, alternate funding for it or applied for other grants. It takes almost as much time to plant 2 trees on someone's property as it does to plant an acre. I mean, the just coordination and the logistics. So you kind of get more bang for your buck and for your time going out and planting an acre on someone's property. It has a much higher environmental impact than 1 to 10 trees. But I would like to resurrect that program at some point. The other one is private forest conservation program. This is where we used the fee in lieu forest conservation funding to create easements on private property. And the biggest thing that this did was get us into some of those agricultural fields that didn't have a proper riparian forest buffer and give a 100-foot setback from that stream to plant a proper buffer between that agricultural field and the stream. So we would not have normally been able to get into these private properties to do so. So we were granted 1.2 million to do 72 acres. And once that was complete, there wasn't enough funding left in the Forest Conservation Fee in Lieu Fund to continue that program. But again, I would love to see that happen again. It really got us into areas that were so environmentally sensitive that we would not normally be able to reach. So that, let me press escape here. Sorry. I'll stop sharing my screen because that looks like a mess. So those are all of our programs. Please let me know if you have any questions. I see somebody wrote, we love working with the Students Branching Out program. But yeah, those are all of our programs, a brief overview, and I'll answer any questions at the end of everybody's panel session.
Thanks, Megan. Super exciting to see all the great work going on in Howard County, and looking forward to talking about that more. Josh, you care to enlighten us on what's going on in Anne Arundel County?
Sure, I'll get my screen set up here. Everybody can see it? Okay, there we go. So good morning, folks. My name's Josh Clark. I'm the Restoration Coordinator with the Anne Arundel County Watershed Stewards Academy. For folks who don't know about WSA, we train community leaders to take action in the landscape for cleaner waterways. And one of our new programs in county is Replant Anne Arundel, which I will be speaking about today. So a little bit of background, Anne Arundel County between 2013 and 2017 lost about 2,500 acres of canopy, which was the highest rate of loss for the urbanized counties in Maryland. And this led to the county looking at how to reduce that loss and restore the canopy by planting trees, of course. So we had a Forest Conservation Act passed, which kind of stemmed the flow of the loss. But then the county ended up contracting with WSA to plant trees, which then became the program Replant Anne Arundel. Just really important to kind of note at the beginning, that does not cover invasives removal or site preparation. It does not cover maintenance, and in the end, it didn't really cover our personnel. So we first incorporated the invasives removal and maintenance into the greater program, and then we got additional funding for our personnel through the Helena Foundation. What's really exciting about this program is that pretty much any resident in county within the MS4 permit of the county can qualify for getting the trees. And what we've built is known as the Tree Trooper program, is a way to kind of get people engaged and help manage how the trees go in. But those trees can be planted pretty much anywhere, and particularly on private property, which I think makes this a really exciting program. So HOAs, congregations, schools, businesses, all those folks in county are actually open to the funds. With that in mind, though, we did want to prioritize where the trees were going. So we did focus on geographic coverage, north to south, east to west. We were definitely prioritizing diversity and in whether that's socioeconomic, however that fell, and of course, targeting the areas where we were having the significant canopy loss. So as I briefly mentioned, getting the trees in the ground really do center on volunteers. That's kind of the bread and butter of the WSA. We created a new action group of our watershed stewards and community volunteers, and we have called them the Tree Troopers. And we partnered with the Alliance for the Bay, and specifically with their tree steward training program. And that was pretty much the basis of what the background the tree troopers were going to get. That was tree biology and identification, proper sighting in the landscape, which really boiled down to installation and maintenance practices. And then we also incorporated some WSA training, whether that's community outreach, engagement, education, that sort of thing. And then they also are responsible for project development and implementation. And then over time, as the trees have been in the ground, help us with maintenance and monitoring of the trees. The trees we put in are what we like to call Goldilocks trees. They're not bare root whips, and they're not big B&B trees. This is really centered on the idea that the trees should be easy for the volunteers, above the deer browse line, some instant gratification, which is a great selling point for private residences and properties. And then also well on their way to helping us in the county get stormwater credits. At the end of the day, this actually really helps with the survivability of the stock as well. We also have developed a resilient species list, which really centers around trees that should do well moving forward with climate. Things that will be happier with warmer temperatures and higher precipitation rates. So under the replant umbrella, we folded in backyard buffers. We administer the DNR's backyard buffer program for Anne Arundel County. As I was just mentioning, the Tree Troopers, all of their projects are in here as well. And then the final branch, please forgive the pun, of Replant Anne Arundel, is our Grows of Gratitude program. And this is very similar to the Backyard Buffers program, in which residents are able to pick up and order trees online, and then bring them home and install them themselves. The Groves of Gratitude trees are a bit larger than the bare root whips with backyard buffers. They're about 2 to 3 gallon. And it just makes them easy to fit in a car and easy for the average resident to actually get in the ground. They order individual trees, or they can order the groves, which range from a pollinator grove or a shade grove or a screening grove. But they were specifically designed packages that we put together with pretty easy to follow installation practices included within that. Really interesting part of the Grows of Gratitude program is that half of the contributions that came in went to the Centro de Ayuda, or the Center of Help, which is a great organization in county in Annapolis that helps provide support to immigrant families in times of need. So in the pilot year of the program, I went ahead too quickly. There we go. It was incredibly exciting because it was pretty successful. We got almost 5,000 trees into the ground, even with COVID. Like I've mentioned, this is very much volunteer driven, but at the end of the day, we had to shift to some more contractor plantings. So as you look at this breakdown, it broke down to about half of the trees in the replant umbrella being the backyard buffers, but then we also had about 2,400 of those trees being the tree trooper trees, some restoration trees, and the grows of gratitude trees. But for the first year, it was very successful engaging residents. About 204 different projects were installed by about 44 active tree troopers, which is a really great metric moving forward for our goals in 2021. So you'll notice that our goals moving into this year are pretty similar to what we were looking at in the quantity of trees that are going into the ground, but we're really trying to focus again on volunteer planting and engagement opposed to contractors, as that will hopefully make our funding go a little bit farther. We had hoped to train about 50 new tree troopers this year. We've almost hit that goal. We're going to be holding another training session this summer, and we're well on our way to really engaging the residents in the county. But with that being said, one of the bigger concerns that we're running into is that we're kind of hitting the green choir, if that makes sense. And we're really hoping to get greater engagement in North and West County and other underrepresented communities moving forward. But I think that is actually the end of my slides there, and I will turn it over to Justin.
Thanks so much, Josh. Also, amazing work that's going on in Anne Arundel County. Thanks for sharing that. So, Justin, you want to take us home by showing us what's going on in Baltimore City? Justin, you're muted. There had to be somebody.
I already said there's going to be one technical glitch. All right, can you hear me now?
You're all good.
Thanks. I'm Justin Bowers. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Baltimore Tree Trust, and it's a pleasure to be here virtually with you all and have the opportunity to discuss some of the exciting work that my staff and I are able to accomplish in the city. What I thought I'd share today is just a brief overview of this work through the lens of our programs and our services that we offer, and quickly kind of touch on the approach that we take and the unique sort of facets of that and how that's enabling us to really start to expand and think broadly about how we're increasing our tree planting numbers in the city. And then lastly, touch on just a few of our data sets that we have in the city, both Tree Baltimore and Baltimore Tree Trust data sets that is really the foundation behind a lot of the work that we're doing. And if there's time, which I think we're going to be pumping up against our discussion time, I'll go over some of the thoughts that we've developed in the process of expanding our operations. So the Tree Trust was founded in 2008. At this time, there was somewhat of a reckoning, I think, happening as the science was really starting to gather momentum behind this idea that healthy trees and green spaces were essential for healthy urban communities. Baltimore, it should be said, that took this message and heeded that message earlier than a lot of other municipalities in the country. So around 2007, 2008, they established a program called Tree Baltimore to coordinate and to provide resources to expand tree planting efforts citywide. As a 501c3 nonprofit, the Tree Trust was founded sort of as a sister organization to both help implement that mission and attract private funding to that initiative. So we have a pretty clear mandate. We're trying to expand and preserve tree canopy in Baltimore City. That mission is anchored by a set of 4 core programs, which I think have remained relatively durable, I think, through our 13 years, starting with our flagship program, Trees for Public Health. That's really the vehicle that we use for going in and working with neighborhood associations and community groups to do neighborhood scale, high impact plantings, where we're looking at street trees, school campuses, parks in the neighborhood, and really investing a lot of resources and time into planting up, quote unquote, that neighborhood. So to date, I think we've probably planted out probably over a dozen neighborhoods, high priority neighborhoods across Baltimore City. Next, we have a burgeoning program called the Neighborhood Forester Initiative, previously called the Urban Roots Apprenticeship, which is our urban workforce development model. That program became really crucial in the past year and a half during COVID, where we really couldn't rely on the volunteer groups that we had used in the past to do a lot of our planting. And as essential workers in the city, we were actually able to experience greater planting numbers than in any prior year to that. So that model was really validated, where we're hiring local city residents to have a professional urban forestry corps that's really set up in a way that they can not just plant greater and greater numbers of trees, but also take care of those trees for the long term. Next, we have our Forest for the Future program, which is sort of an amalgamation of various programs that we've had over the years, which encompasses all of our large property afforestation and reforestation programs. So through this, we've worked with Baltimore City Schools in the past. We've worked with the Baltimore Municipal Golf Corporation, as well as Baltimore City Rec and Parks, to address large landscape scale tree plantings. And typically, while we're used 2-inch caliper native B&Bs, on the large properties, we'll work with some smaller stocks, some more mixed stock, maybe some shrubs and some medium-sized trees that we would normally plant to really get more bang for that buck. Through this program, we've also worked with private landowners such as the Archdiocese of Baltimore and the Associated Jewish Federation to plant out cemeteries and other large tracts of land, which there are few and far between in the city. Lastly, we have a Corporate Greening Day, which is a service event program that we run. We typically try to do about 10 to 15 per year, where we partner with local employers to get their company out, to just get them engaged and educating them about the importance of the tree canopy and getting them involved with usually a block level street tree planting day over a 4-hour weekend or weekday planting event. So that's been on hiatus for the past year and a half, but we're really excited to get that back up and going starting this fall. And beyond our programs, our grant-funded programs, we offer for services where we work with developers to do mitigation consultant and tree planting, as well as maintenance and watering. Starting this summer, we're actually developing programs in concrete removal and stump grinding to help open up new possibilities for tree planting in the city, which, as we'll discuss, I'm sure, is going to become increasingly more of a challenge as we try to increase tree planting. So next, I just wanted to touch on a little bit about our process. As you can see here, it's nothing crazy. It's more or less a linear process that we're able to scale up or scale back depending on the size of our project. I do want to point out just a few aspects of it that I think are unique and are truly crucial to helping us accomplish everything that we've been able to do. First and foremost, when it comes to site identification, working with the city of Baltimore, who has a tree planting prioritization map, is very helpful for making sure that the projects that we undertake have this equity lens that we're grateful to say has been implemented, I think, since 2011. And so this map that's available, it's publicly available, looks at urban tree canopy information at the neighborhood scale, as well as various socioeconomic variables to help guide planting decisions by groups like us, as well as city contractors. So we also invest a lot of resources into the site assessment and the outreach phases of our projects. When it comes to implementation, starting in spring 2020, we made it an important part of our work to make sure that we're inventorying all of our plantings. You know, as we look to keep increasing the number of trees under our stewardship, so to speak, we found that it was important to make sure that we had as airtight of a data set on those tree plantings as possible. And it's proven to actually be a great skill set to teach our trainees in our neighborhood forester initiative as well. So every time we're in a neighborhood, like for instance, right now we're in 2 separate neighborhoods. One is very urban, Pigtown, and one is a park in Leakin Park, Gwynns Falls Leakin Park in Baltimore. We have data sets that showcase that tree's health and condition and species, as well as we take a photo of every single tree so we know what that condition of that tree was when it went in the ground. So in follow-up years, we can do some comparison and contrasting. And that's directly related to how our vision of monitoring and maintenance. Every tree that we plant is included with a 2-year maintenance warranty. And unlike private contractors who may come back and just replace a tree if it's looking diseased or if it's dead over that span of maintenance, we actually are developing our capacity to actually return to those trees on a biweekly or monthly basis, where we're watering, we're replacing stakes, we are pruning to make sure that that tree really has the best shot to establish. And that 2-year warranty has also been really critical, we found, in helping build trust when we're going into communities, especially where there's some resistance to having more trees added, because a lot of the concerns that we find is that folks expect those trees to become a maintenance burden that they'll ultimately have to take on. And so by demonstrating that that tree is not going to become blighted and that, you know, we're having a presence that extends beyond just the tree planting, has helped pave the way to a lot smoother relationship building process with the communities that we work in. So I think I'm going to finish off here and just discuss a little bit of our planting numbers here in the city. You can see there at the top, our citywide tree canopy is last been recorded at 28%. And that's based off of a satellite imagery analysis that the U.S. Forest Service and the city of Baltimore completed. I guess the data set was recorded between 2007 and 2015. That same analysis found that over that 8-year time span, our canopy increased by 1%, which is pretty unique. I think we were one of just a handful of cities across the country that reported a positive gain in tree canopy during that time. Although that figure, I think, is met with a little bit more ambivalence internally, where we understand locally that you know, there's a lot of standing ash, a lot of standing elm that is being captured in that information. And there's still a lot of sort of deferred maintenance and management that's required to really give a true estimate of what our tree canopy is. So take it with a grain of salt, but it's something that we can certainly pat our backs on a little bit to say that what we are doing is working. But the third line here, you'll see that range, although 28% on average, that includes a huge variation. And it's not surprising, I guess, if you consider, you know, the gradient of urbanization in the city. We have anywhere from as low as 3%, probably in the downtown core, out to 72%. In some of the neighborhoods around the fringe of the city, around Howard and Baltimore County, where there's a lot more larger natural areas and open spaces. So there is some natural variance we see there, but subsequent studies that followed up on this data set showcased that there was positive correlations that indicated that greater percentage of urban tree canopy was related to indicators of health, wealth, and well-being, that we know that there is work to be done, that we can have a positive social impact as well as a positive environmental impact in communities that are a little bit more urbanized, have more impervious surfaces that we can remove and plant more green spaces. So that was pretty illuminating, I think, for a lot of people in the city. Even still, on average, I think over the past few years, we're planting somewhere between 7,000 and 9,000 trees as a city, which is not enough, to be frank, to maintain that 28% tree canopy, given all of the assumptions we can make about natural loss due to pests and disease and development. So the Tree Trust, and you can see here on the bar chart where that asterisk is above 2008, that's where we started implementing our neighborhood forester program, where we started to have our own in-house crew to plant. And that really allowed us to expand our tree planting numbers to the point where we're now the lead tree planting organization citywide. And the last 2021 showcases that, you know, we're on pace right now to hit 3,000. And again, these are 2-inch caliper, large B&B street trees primarily that we're planting. We're on pace for 3,000 trees this year, with a model in place with our urban foresters, with our inventorying system and our maintenance warranties, to increase that hopefully to 10,000 trees per year by the year 2025. But there's a lot of work to get done if we're going to get there. And I think it's going to take a lot of networking and partnerships with our neighbors around the region. So with that, I'll leave that there and get to a discussion with everyone.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you again, all. Great presentations. Double snaps and high fives for being pretty much on time with things. We got a number of questions that come in, and this may shock you, but 2 of the first questions that come in were around funding and maintenance. I'm going to start with the maintenance question, if I can find it here. After prepping and planting a site, what efforts exist to monitor, manage, or maintain newly installed canopy assets? And we know that varies tremendously between an ag field out on the Eastern Shore versus a street tree in Baltimore City. But maybe if a few of you could touch on that, maybe since I mentioned those 2, David, if you wanted to start with what it takes to care for a tubing in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, as I mentioned, we're very lucky that we have this core of students that comes out to help us do this every spring. Again, before it gets too hot, before it gets too buggy, before the grasses get too tall. And so I wish that we were doing what Justin was doing, which is taking a picture of every tree we plant so that we can go back and look at it over time. I have somewhat ambitious goals to maybe do something like that one day with GIS mapping. We know based on numbers that from cradle to from cradle to forever home for these trees, when they start in our nursery to when we plant them and then we go back and check on them later, we're seeing about a 75 to 85% survival rate. But we're not doing very much monitoring of those sites. We're getting them in the ground. We're relying on Mother Nature to take its course, and by planting the native species that we use that love these riparian areas, they're just kind of take care of themselves. But we will go back with these crews of students, and once the tree hits that 2 to 3 inch diameter where we know it's going to be fine, we'll remove the tubing, try to recycle or reuse as much of that as possible, and then the forest is just there for perpetuity.
Sounds a lot like what you're doing in the city, Justin.
A little bit. Yes, I mean, as we know, I mean, it's exponentially more difficult for a tree to establish in a highly urbanized context than in a more naturalized one where it's evolved for many generations. So we've had to do a lot of finagling, I think, with leveraging our workforce development program, I think, to help convince and make the argument for tree maintenance, which has historically been difficult to fund, I think. And some of that's just shifting naturally, but I think being able to demonstrate that tree maintenance is job creation has been a huge narrative for us to convince folks that it was something that has an impact, not just that is sort of abstract. And for a lot of folks who don't necessarily see the benefits of trees on a daily basis, or even on a generational basis, you might not really experience the impact that a healthy tree can have. But a neighborhood that may not have any interest in climate change or doesn't care about the messaging that us as environmentalists are concerned about sharing, they definitely hear the message of job creation. And that's actually how the program was founded, where we were going into communities, doing our best to be authentic with our messaging and our commitment to being in that neighborhood until the project was through. And we were consistently finding that people were interested in the jobs, the potential for jobs than there were for the trees. And thankfully, we're able to fund folks at a living wage in Baltimore City. We're able to offer a realistic and viable career pathway in the broader landscaping field, and we're trying to sort of winnow that down into a more urban forestry focused market in Baltimore City. So the Tree Trust, I think we're trying to not just create individual career pathways, but we're also trying to showcase that there is a market for it, and maintenance just is kind of that's what we're in it for. But having a dual message that the community vibes with is also really important.
Thanks. Next question coming from Paul Emart. Could each of the speakers please say how much their annual budgets are for their tree planting activities, or if there's a $1 per acre spending rate available? And Megan, I'm going to let you tackle this one first because I know you're eager to talk about funding, and then Josh, maybe you could speak to it as well.
So each of my programs have a different funding source and level. The Stream Relief Program has an annual funding from Howard County Recreation and Parks General Fund of $27,000. That breaks down to about $10,800 per acre. And that's a little bit low because we're using smaller stock and we're also planting shrubs, which are less expensive. For the Turf to Tree program, our baseline is $120,000 per year. With that, we're able to get about 2,000 trees in the ground, and this costs about $12,000 per acre. So again, we plant at a density of 200 trees per acre, and that's kind of a strict rule for that program. We are working with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and Greater Baltimore Wilderness Coalition on a grant that will help us triple our planting rates over the next 3 years. So we'll be getting a good amount more money. We're working on year one budgets right now, so I don't have concrete numbers. but we will be able to triple our planting programs, and that's amazing.
I would say for us with Replant Anne Arundel, our county contract is $100K, and then we were able to secure the funding through the Helena Foundation for the personnel. So we're right at 250 to 260K for our programming, which covers specifically the tree trooper projects and Grows of Gratitude.
Awesome, thanks, guys. I will also mention, as Delegate Stein mentioned to kick us off, super exciting about the 5 Million Trees initiative for the state, for which I am sure we are all have every single digit crossed that we will be able to tap into those funds to greatly accelerate our tree planting efforts over the next 8 to 10 years. Let's see here. Lots of other questions coming in here. Ann Strozik asked Josh if you could share the list of trees that you planted that are, that resilient species list, and several other people have given that a thumbs up. I know I'm curious as well.
I'll drop that into the chat here, so you guys can see that. But this is the PDF version of the list. We have the understory and the canopy trees, but this is really come out of a list that went through ModFacts with the Forest Service, a lot of input in county, and then availability. So yeah, feel free to take a look. If you guys have questions about that, let me know. But that's our tree menu, as we like to call it, with the tree troopers.
As a side note as well, I think there's been 1 or 2 requests if we can all adopt your term Goldilocks trees, because
please do.
Very enchanting. Let's see here. There's also been a request for the data sets that you guys mentioned. I don't know if you post your data, either just those tabular data versus geographic data online, but I assume we could just send people to your websites to get more information or contact you directly.
For us, all of our planting data is synced over the cloud to the City Forestry Division, and they update the citywide tree inventory, which is available on their website, I think twice a year or maybe quarterly.
Great. And that's another thing that the coalition is trying to do, is to get all the partners talking together and be like, how do we all get on the same page with tracking our numbers, so that we can really collectively quantify the impacts that we're making. So working on that going forward. I would ask, another thing that we'll be working on, hopefully as a team here, is effective marketing. And a number of you all mentioned the great work that you're doing on private property. We know going forward that the bulk of the tree planting we need to do is going to be on private property. And I wonder if 1 or 2 of you could just briefly talk about not necessarily the programs that you already mentioned, but is there specific messaging or incentives that you have found really grab people's attention? Josh, I see you nodding. I don't know if you'd like to go first on that one.
What's been interesting about Replant's kind of first or let's call it year and a half, is that we are getting a lot of folks who have kind of already drank the Kool-Aid with that, right? So we have folks that really know the benefits of trees, but that's also led to us trying to, extract from them what was exciting about, having the opportunity to get the trees. Just going into the energy savings and the beauty of it, and a big part of it too is the ecology. That's been really successful. I don't know, as we're moving forward and trying to break into communities that we haven't gotten in, or that we have not been successful in yet, what that's going to look like. But I'm interested to see what other folks have to say about this.
I spoke to it a bit already, but to borrow your phrase, Josh, we're not working very often with the green choir, so to speak. Which I like that. I'm gonna probably borrow that. But yeah, I mean, I think the job creation message message has worked for us. Folks are also interested in trees that typically that don't produce a mess, and so convincing them that whatever tree that they receive doesn't create a mess, whether it's a white lie or not. Sometimes you have to kind of use a little craft, little salesmanship.
Justin, I found it interesting though that the title of your program, one of your programs, was Trees for Public Health, and I was curious, does that message resonate in your communities?
I think at one scale it does. Certainly with community leaders, neighborhood associations, council folks who often get involved when we're talking about projects that are affecting a huge neighborhood or a prominent neighborhood in their jurisdiction. Are working. I think a lot about the grassroots salesmanship that we have to do, because our crew are really our lead ambassadors for the organization, because we have 12 to 15 folks out there every day who are talking to residents as they're planting in front of their homes. But the Trees for Public Health program has been massively successful because that data is so clear, and you can paint a really direct picture between the impact that a healthy tree canopy has in some parts of the city on the look and feel of that community compared to those that don't. So I think that's beneficial for a city like Baltimore. I'm not so sure how transferable it is into the counties, but.
And just very briefly, like zooming back out to the country, to the rural areas, I mean, there's 2 million acres of farmland in the state of Maryland. And so CBF has been doing this programming for about 20 years. And it all really started, knocking on people's doors. If our restoration scientists saw cows in the stream, the way we tried to sell it to them was, this is going to be better for your herd health. And, technically it's illegal anywhere in the state to have livestock in streams. So we can help you with the technical assistance. We can help you with the funding. We came at it as like a holistic whole farm approach. So the trees are one part of the many things that we're offering them. And when we tell them that you can give them, again, the technical assistance and funding, they get on board, and then the word of mouth starts to spread. So we're kind of experiencing that same thing now, where everyone who has already drank the Kool-Aid has been a part of our program, and we're starting to run out of those landowners. So pushing forward as we try to get more of those 2 million acres back into best management practices, it's going to be a huge endeavor to take on.
I think it's two ways to look at it, right? A challenging opportunity, well, a huge challenge, a tremendous opportunity. So yeah, we've gotten largely past, I think, the Green Choir. We've gotten past a lot of those large acreage plantings that are out there, and now we have to sort of buckle down and really start doing our homework to find what's most engaging and how do we meet people where they are to get a lot more trees in the ground in our urban areas or suburban areas and things like that. So unfortunately, as is always the case, we don't have enough time to just continue talking all day, but I thank you guys all for educating us all on your programs and for sharing your thoughts and knowledge about this. There are a lot more questions. For those of you whose questions we couldn't get to, I apologize. Try to network with these guys either on our networking button over on the right, or reach out to them directly. We're past the planting season, so they might be able to get back to you within a day or two. Justin has one last thing. One day? Okay, Justin's asking for
one more week.
Oh, one more week. All right. Yeah, thank you again. As a reminder, our next panel starts at 11:35, so you've got 9 minutes to network or bio break or coffee break, etc. Stretch your legs, get some deep breaths in. After that, I hope you all stay with us. We have a fantastic opportunity, a cooking opportunity to walk you through lunch with a local chef, Monica Alvarado from Bread and Butter Kitchen down in Eastport. Is going to be doing a cooking class with us. So take your laptops downstairs to your kitchen while you eat and learn a bit. Guys, thank you all again for this great panel workshop. I look forward to working with you more. For those of you who are still with us who are interested in continuing the discussion about trees, I would encourage you to join us next Tuesday. The Greater Baltimore Wilderness Coalition is hosting a tree summit where we're going to really start diving into the meat of the matter of how do we really significantly accelerate tree planting efforts working together, alluding to the initiative that Megan mentioned that Howard County secured a grant for. How do we triple tree planting over the next few years? How do we plant 10 million 5 million trees over the next 8 years? It's going to take all of us to do it, and we're going to need to be creative and working together and communicating on a regular basis. So looking forward to that. If you have questions about that summit, please reach out to me, Ashley Trout. You can find me all over this hop in, I suppose. I'll also be hopping in and out of networking. And guys, thank you all very much. Plant on.
Thank you, everyone.